My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 42 years old, a software engineer, and just 3 weeks ago my wife and I moved with our 2 kids into Maplewood, Ohio. I thought we had found a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets, friendly waves from the porches, and the kind of calm I'd been craving after years in a busy city. That illusion shattered on a Thursday night. I was sitting in the crowded community hall, folding chairs packed shoulder to shoulder, when Gerald Whitman, our so-called HOA president, took the floor. He was 68, with the kind of old-fashioned authority people instinctively respected. After 25 years of service, he announced, "I'll be retiring as president of the Maplewood Homeowners Association. Tonight, I introduce your next leader." The room broke into polite applause, neighbors nodding approvingly. I sat frozen. Something didn't add up. Only days earlier, I had tried to verify our HOA's registration with the city. At my old neighborhood in Columbus, HOAs came with thick binders of bylaws, official addresses, annual budgets. But when I asked the county clerk here in Maplewood, she'd looked at me like I'd spoken another language. No HOA has ever been registered for Maplewood. So when Gerald introduced his wife as acting president until our son Evan is ready, I stood up. My voice shook, but I forced it out. "Excuse me, before you hand over leadership, could we see the bylaws?" The city registration, maybe a financial report. The hall went silent. Then a scoff rose from the back. "Who are you?" an elderly woman called. "You've been here 5 minutes." Gerald has led us faithfully for decades. Several others chimed in. He kept the neighborhood safe. We pay only $60 a year. That's nothing, I swallowed hard. At my last HOA, $60 wouldn't cover the paper for the mailings. If Maplewood has no registered HOA, then what exactly have we been paying for? Gasps scattered across the hall. Gerald's wife, Marla, stiffened in her seat. "This is outrageous," she snapped. "We've protected this community for 25 years. You dare accuse us? I'm not accusing anyone." I interrupted, my pulse hammering. "I'm asking for proof. By law, HOAs must be registered with the state. If it isn't on record, it isn't real." Gerald's face darkened. He pounded the table with his palm. "Sit down. You don't understand how things work here." And then, the moment that shifted everything, his son Evan, standing beside him, muttered loud enough for the microphone to catch Dad. "We shouldn't do this." The words rippled through the room like an earthquake. People turned toward Evan, brows furrowed. Gerald barked at him. Quiet, but the damage was done. I pulled out my phone. "This," I said, holding up the screen, "is an email from Franklin County Records. It states clearly, no registered homeowners association exists for the neighborhood of Maplewood." The hall erupted. Some shouted, "What does this mean?" Others yelled, "Are we being scammed?" The once orderly meeting dissolved into chaos, neighbors arguing across aisles, voices rising in anger and disbelief. Gerald and Marla tried to shout everyone down, but the tide had turned, and in that moment, as eyes darted between me, Gerald, and Evan, I realized the secret they had buried for a quarter century was about to unravel loudly, publicly, and irreversibly. 2 weeks earlier, before I ever stood in that meeting hall. I had been unpacking boxes in our new kitchen when the doorbell rang. A tall man with thinning gray hair stood on my porch, holding a clipboard. "Welcome to Maplewood," he said warmly. "I'm Gerald Whitman, president of the Homeowners Association. I just need to collect the annual dues, $60? I blinked. "Already, it's only once a year," he said quickly. "We keep the streets plowed in winter, organize the summer picnic, fund the neighborhood watch. It's a small price for a safe, clean community. $60. Back in Columbus, our HOA fees were closer to $600. My first instinct was to think Maplewood residents had it easy. But when I asked for a receipt, Gerald scribbled one on a pad of carbon paper, the kind a delivery driver might use. No letterhead, no HOA logo. Just paid in full $60. Could I see the bylaws? I asked casually. He hesitated, then handed me a photocopy of a stapled packet. The text was blurry, half the words cut off at the edges. No signatures, no date of approval. Something in my stomach tightened. That night, curiosity gnawed at me. I logged into the county records database, searching Maplewood Homeowners Association. Nothing. I tried the state's business registry. Again, nothing. The next morning, I drove downtown to the Franklin County Clerk's office. A woman in a navy blazer listened patiently as I explained. She typed into her computer, frowned, and shook her head. "Sir, Maplewood is not registered as an HOA. Never has been." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "But they're collecting fees." She shrugged. "Plenty of neighborhoods call themselves associations informally. But if they're collecting mandatory dues, that's illegal without registration. You might want to look into it." By the time I drove home, anger and disbelief were swirling in my chest. If what she said was true, then Gerald and his wife had been running a phantom HOA for years, maybe decades. I told my wife, Emily, that evening over dinner, "Don't get involved," she warned. "We just moved here. The last thing we need is enemies." But I couldn't let it go. The idea of every neighbor handing over money, year after year, to people with no legal authority, it kept me up at night. So I decided to wait. Gerald had mentioned a community meeting coming up in 2 weeks. I figured I'd raise my questions there, in front of everyone. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe there was paperwork I hadn't found. But when the meeting began and Gerald announced his retirement, something snapped. I couldn't stay quiet. Now, in that suffocating hall. Marla was glaring at me across the table. Her voice sliced through the chaos like a whip. "You dare come into our neighborhood, questioning our work." After 3 weeks, she spat. "We've kept this place safe while you lived somewhere else. You have no right to demand anything from us." Several older neighbors nodded along, muttering agreement. One woman shouted, "He's just stirring trouble." My pulse thundered. I raised the phone higher. "This isn't trouble." I said, "This is fact. The county has no record of Maplewood HOA. If you can show me the registration tonight, I'll apologize to everyone in this room. But if you can't, then you've been taking money under false pretenses for 25 years. Gasps, a few claps, then shouting again. The room had split into factions, half outraged, half still loyal to Gerald. And as voices clashed around me, Gerald leaned close to his microphone, eyes burning with rage. "You're going to regret this," he said softly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. The room had dissolved into a storm of voices, the kind where everyone talks at once and no one listens. I stood gripping my phone, the email from the county clerk glowing on the screen, while Gerald's supporters shouted over one another. "He fixed the potholes last year," one man yelled. "Who else would pay for the holiday lights?" a woman cried. "You're accusing them without proof," another barked. Proof. The word echoed bitterly in my head. What I had felt like proof, but to those loyal to Gerald and Marla, it wasn't enough. Then Gerald raised a hand, and the noise quieted. Slowly, almost theatrically, he pulled a folded document from his leather briefcase. He smoothed it across the table, the city seal printed neatly at the top. "You want proof." His voice was calm now, almost smug. "Here it is. A letter from the city recognizing Maplewood's HOA, stamped and dated years ago. We've kept order here while the rest of the world crumbled, and you dare to call us liars." The letter was passed down the rows, and as neighbors leaned in to read, I saw their shoulders relax, their nods returning. The tide was shifting back. My stomach dropped. I craned my neck to catch a glimpse of the page as it passed near me. The seal looked real enough, the letterhead crisp and professional, but something bothered me: the font. It wasn't the standard serif the county used in every other document I'd seen. This was a clean, modern sans serif. Too modern. That's not real, I said, louder than I intended. The county uses Times New Roman on all its official correspondence. That's Arial. Look at it. Murmurs again. Someone chuckled. He's nitpicking fonts now. Gerald's lips curled into a satisfied grin. See how desperate he is. A stranger, accusing us, pointing at fonts. This meeting is over. The gavel came down on the table with a sharp crack. Chairs screeched as people stood. Some glared at me as they filed past. Others avoided my eyes. A handful whispered, "Be careful," as they slipped out. By the time I stepped into the cold night air, I felt like I had just gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight. Emily was waiting in the car. "How did it go?" she asked. I laughed bitterly. Depends who you ask. Half of them think I'm the neighborhood villain. The other half, I think they're starting to wonder. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed something sticking out of our mailbox. An envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in block letters, "Drop it or else." My hands trembled as I held it. The words were blunt, chilling, no signature. Emily gasped when she read it. "Daniel, this is dangerous. They know where we live. Please, stop before this gets worse." But I couldn't. That night I sat at my desk, staring at the letter. Gerald's smug face replaying in my mind. Maybe the document he showed would hold up under casual eyes, but I knew it was a fake. And if he was willing to wave a forgery in front of the whole neighborhood, what else had he and Marla been hiding? I opened my laptop, pulling up public records again, this time determined to dig deeper into property deeds, bank liens, anything I could access. Somewhere in the shadows of Maplewood's history lay the proof I needed. I leaned back in my chair, gripping the threatening note between my fingers. "If they want me to drop it," I muttered. "Then I know I'm onto something." And right there, I made a promise I wouldn't stop until the entire neighborhood saw the truth, no matter what it cost me. The next morning, the neighborhood looked deceptively calm. Sprinklers hissed across manicured lawns, kids biked down sidewalks, and the mail truck rattled by as if nothing had happened the night before. But under the surface, Maplewood was boiling. I could feel it in the way neighbors avoided my eyes when I waved. Some, like Mrs. Porter from across the street, gave me a tight smile and quickly ducked inside. Others muttered as I passed, their words low but sharp: "Troublemaker," "outsider." But there were also those who lingered, who hesitated before shutting their doors. A quiet look, a small nod. It was enough to tell me not everyone believed Gerald's letter. That evening, I received a knock at the door. It was Tom Harrison, a retired attorney who lived 2 houses down. His silver hair was combed neatly, his expression grave. "Mind if I come in?" Over cups of coffee at my kitchen table. Tom leaned in. "I saw that letter Gerald showed. It's a fake. The city doesn't issue recognition letters like that anymore, not since the late 90s. And that seal, it was discontinued years ago. Relief washed through me. So I'm not crazy. Not at all," he said. "But you'll need more than suspicions to convince the others. Gerald has history on his side. 25 years of trust doesn't crumble overnight." Emily joined us, folding her arms. "So what do we do? He's already threatened us." Tom's gaze sharpened. "We gather evidence, real evidence, documents, bank records, testimonies. If they've been running this scam for decades, there's a paper trail somewhere." The next day, we met in secret at the back room of the local diner. To my surprise, 5 neighbors showed up. Tom, of course. Then there was Lisa, a single mom who worked as a bookkeeper, Henry, a former accountant, Maria, who owned the copy shop downtown, and Jake, a 20-something IT guy with a knack for digging into databases. They were nervous, whispering like we were planning a heist, but there was a fire in their eyes too. Lisa spoke first. I've kept all my receipts since I moved here 15 years ago. They're all different, some handwritten, some printed, none consistent. Henry pulled a small folder from his bag. I compared the dates of those receipts with city services. Gerald claimed the HOA paid for tree trimming in 2012, but the city's records show it was handled by the county budget that year. Meaning we paid for nothing, Maria added. People think Gerald's wife is sweet, but she came to me last year asking if I could print official-looking letters with the city seal. I told her I couldn't, it was illegal. She walked out furious. The room fell silent. We were all thinking the same thing. If Marla was willing to forge documents once, she'd do it again. Jake tapped his laptop. I found an account number on one of Lisa's older receipts. It doesn't match any business account. It's a personal checking account at the local credit union. I exhaled slowly. So every $60 check we've written for decades went straight into their pockets. Tom nodded grimly. That's fraud. But we'll need a clear, undeniable presentation before the whole neighborhood. Otherwise, Gerald will spin it again. For the first time since moving here, I felt less alone. It wasn't just me against the Whitmans anymore, it was a team. As we packed up, Lisa placed her hand on mine. Be careful. Daniel, people like Gerald don't let go easily. That night, walking home under the streetlights, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Every passing car made me glance over my shoulder. By the time I reached my porch, there was another envelope waiting in the mailbox. This one didn't just say drop it. It said, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I stood frozen on my lawn, the note trembling in my hands. The Whitmans weren't just bluffing anymore, they were escalating. And if they thought a threat would silence me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, I drove back to the Franklin County Clerk's office. I'd already seen the email confirmation, but I needed something stronger, something I could hold in my hands when Gerald inevitably tried to wave around another forged letter. The clerk, a tired-looking man with glasses slipping down his nose, frowned at me. Back again, I need a written statement. I said, something official. People think I'm making this up. He disappeared into the back and returned with a printed document bearing the county seal. It read, in bold, no record of a registered Homeowners Association exists for the neighborhood of Maplewood. He stamped it, signed it, and slid it across the counter. I tucked it carefully into a folder. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was undeniable proof. That afternoon, our group gathered again at the diner. When I laid the stamped letter on the table, the air seemed to change. Maria let out a low whistle. They can't argue with that. They'll try, Tom warned. Gerald always does. But this is good. It's very good. Jake had been typing furiously on his laptop. I dug a little deeper into Gerald and Marla's past. Before Maplewood, they lived in Riverton. Guess what? He spun the screen toward us. There was a Riverton HOA, too. And just like here, no record of it being registered. Lisa's eyes widened. You mean they've done this before? Looks like it, Jake said. They left Riverton 26 years ago, right after a group of residents filed complaints with the state attorney's office. The complaints went nowhere because the residents didn't have enough proof, but the Whitmans disappeared a few months later and reappeared here. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a pattern, a system, a scam refined over decades. They're professionals, Henry muttered. Con artists hiding in plain sight. Tom drummed his fingers on the table. We'll need to show this history to the neighbors. People won't want to admit they've been fooled for 25 years. But if we can connect the dots, Riverton, the forged letter, The personal accounts, they'll have no choice. Still, doubt crept in. What if they fight back harder? Gerald already tried to intimidate me. Last night, another note showed up. I pulled it from my pocket and placed it on the table. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Maria inhaled sharply. Lisa shivered. They're rattled, Tom said firmly. Threats mean they're scared, but it also means we need to be careful. Keep copies of everything. Share evidence digitally so if one of us is silenced, the rest still have it. The weight of his words pressed on me, but at the same time, I felt a spark of determination. If Gerald and Marla had really been stealing from every family in Maplewood for a quarter century, then exposing them wasn't just about money, it was about justice. Later that evening, while walking the dog, I ran into Mrs. Porter again. She looked torn, twisting her hands together. Daniel, I don't know what to believe. Gerald has always been good to me. He paid for my fence when I couldn't afford it. I hesitated. Did he say it came from HOA funds? She nodded. I sighed. Mrs. Porter, that money came from your own dues and from every neighbor's pocket. He didn't give you a gift. He recycled stolen money to make himself look generous. Her face fell. I never thought of it like that. That's when I realized how hard this battle would be. It wasn't just about exposing fraud, it was about shattering illusions. People didn't want to admit they'd been conned for decades. They would cling to the comfort of believing in Gerald and Marla's service, even when faced with evidence. But illusions don't last forever. As the sun dipped below the rooftops, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Meet me tonight. I know things about Gerald and Marla. Don't tell anyone. The sender's name popped up, Evan Whitman. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. Gerald's own son wanted to talk. I met Evan Whitman in the dimly lit corner of a half-empty coffee shop on the edge of town. The place was quiet, the hum of the espresso machine the only background noise. He sat hunched over a cup of black coffee, his hands fidgeting with the sleeve. When he saw me, he didn't smile. You came. You asked, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. What's this about? He glanced around nervously before lowering his voice. You embarrassed my dad last night. You have no idea how dangerous that was. Dangerous? I leaned forward. Evan, your father is running a fake HOA. He's been taking money from every neighbor for 25 years. That's fraud, plain and simple. He let out a bitter laugh. You think I don't know that I've been living in this mess my whole life? His voice cracked as he continued. When I was a kid, I thought Mom and Dad were just community leaders. They said the money was for keeping the neighborhood safe. But when I got older, I saw the bank statements. The HOA dues went straight into their personal accounts. Vacations, a new car every few years. Even the mortgage on this house paid off with that money. I sat back, stunned, though not entirely surprised. Hearing it from their own son, though, made my stomach churn. Why didn't you say something sooner? I asked. Evan's eyes darkened. Because you don't know them like I do. My dad can be charming in public, but behind closed doors, he's ruthless. When I told him it was wrong, he said if I ever opened my mouth, I'd regret it. A chill ran through me. So why come to me now? He rubbed his temples. Because he wants me to take over. To keep the scam alive. I can't. I won't. But if I refuse, he'll say I'm ungrateful, a traitor. And if I expose him, he'll ruin me. He always finds a way. I opened my folder and slid the stamped letter from the county across the table. You're not alone, Evan. We already have proof there's no HOA. We've got receipts, bank information, testimonies. What we don't have is someone from the inside, someone who can confirm what we all suspect. He stared at the document, his jaw tightening. Do you know what happens if I testify I lose my family? My mother will never speak to me again. And my father. He shook his head. He'll destroy me. Or, I countered, you could finally be free of all of this. 25 years of lies end with you telling the truth. Think about what that would mean for your neighbors, for the people who trusted your parents. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out his phone and scrolled. After a moment, he turned the screen to me. It was a photo of a balance statement from the local credit union. The account holder, Marla Whitman. The balance just over $180,000. All from HOA dues, Evan whispered. This is just one account. There are others. My pulse quickened. It was the smoking gun. But before I could speak, Evan locked his phone and shoved it back in his pocket. I shouldn't have shown you that. You have to help us, I said firmly. We can protect you. We'll make sure the police know you cooperated. He looked at me, torn between fear and longing for release. You don't get it. My dad isn't just going to roll over. He'll fight. He'll threaten. He'll drag everyone down with him. If I go against him, he'll make me pay. I leaned across the table, lowering my voice. Evan, he already made you pay. He trapped you in this lie your whole life. Now you have the chance to end it, to be the one who finally breaks it. He stared down at his coffee, silent for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he whispered, I need time. Don't contact me again. I'll find you when I've decided. Then he stood and walked out, leaving me alone in the booth with my heart pounding. I had the proof. I had the letter. I even had a glimpse of the stolen money. But without Evan's testimony, would it be enough? And worse, what if Gerald already suspected his son had talked to me? The next few days blurred together in a frenzy of whispered conversations, scanned documents, and late-night phone calls. Our little task force, as Tom liked to call it, met almost every evening, huddled in the back of the diner with laptops and coffee-stained notepads. On the table, we spread out our arsenal, Lisa's inconsistent receipts spanning 15 years, Henry's analysis showing city services paid for things Gerald claimed the HOA covered, Maria's statement about Marla requesting forged letters, Jake's screenshots of the personal account at the credit union, and finally, the stamped document from Franklin County. No registered HOA exists for Maplewood. It was a mountain of evidence, and yet I still felt the weight of uncertainty. Evidence meant nothing if the neighborhood refused to see it. Gerald had decades of trust built into his image. All I had was 2 weeks of living here and a growing stack of papers. Tom tapped his pen against the folder. We can't just drop this bomb randomly. We need a strategy. If we call a special meeting, people will show up ready for a fight. We'll have to control the narrative. Control the narrative, Maria repeated. We're not politicians, Tom. We're the ones who've been robbed. Exactly, Tom said. Which means we need to be meticulous, organized, clear. If we look sloppy, Gerald will tear us apart. I nodded. We'll lay it out step by step. First, the receipts showing the money trail. Second, the fake bylaws and forged city letter. Third, the personal account. And finally, the official county statement. Don't forget Riverton, Jake added. If we show they pulled the same stunt there, it'll destroy the idea this was just a misunderstanding. We all agreed. The plan was set a neighborhood-wide emergency meeting, called not by Gerald, but by us. We'd hold it in the same community hall. But this time the story would be ours to tell. But Gerald wasn't going to sit idle. 2 days later, as I was sorting through files on my laptop, Emily walked in with an envelope in her hand. This came certified mail, she said, her brow furrowed. Inside was a thick packet of legalese a cease and desist order. To Daniel Harper, you are hereby instructed to immediately cease making false, defamatory statements regarding Gerald and Marla Whitman and the Maplewood Homeowners Association. Failure to comply will result in legal action seeking damages, including but not limited to slander and libel, punitive damages, and reimbursement of attorney's fees. I read it twice, then dropped it on the table, laughing bitterly. Defamation. He's accusing me of lying while he runs a phantom HOA. Emily wasn't laughing. Daniel, this is serious. What if he really sues Tom came over that evening to review the document? After skimming through, he shook his head. It's bluster. There's no standing. He can't sue you for defamation if what you're saying is true and we have proof. But this letter isn't meant for court. It's meant to scare you. Well, it worked, Emily muttered. I couldn't blame her. I was scared too. Not just for myself, but for my family. Every escalation meant Gerald was more desperate, and desperate men are unpredictable. Still, I folded the cease and desist neatly and slid it into our evidence folder. If he wants to use this at the meeting, fine. It'll make him look even guiltier. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the desk in the dim glow of my laptop, staring at the folder of evidence. Each document felt like a puzzle piece, and together they painted a damning picture. But one piece was still missing Evan. His words echoed in my mind. I need time. Don't contact me again. Would he find the courage to stand against his father? Or would fear keep him silent, leaving us to fight without the one voice that could confirm it all from the inside, as dawn crept through the blinds? I made myself a promise. One way or another, Maplewood was going to see the truth. And if Gerald thought a stack of threats and a forged letter could silence me, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The smear campaign began almost immediately. By Monday morning, the Maplewood neighborhood Facebook group was ablaze. Gerald had posted a long, furious message. Beware of outsiders stirring up trouble. A man who has only lived here a few weeks is spreading lies about our community. He's trying to divide us with false claims and is plotting to dismantle the HOA that has kept Maplewood safe for 25 years. Dozens of comments poured in. Some praised Gerald for his dedication. Others echoed his anger. This Daniel guy should mind his own business. Don't like it. Move out. But sprinkled among them were seeds of doubt. Why doesn't the city have records? Then I'd like to see the bylaws myself. I scrolled through it all with clenched fists. He's painting me as the villain, I muttered. Emily sighed. And people believe him. That's the scary part. By evening, Gerald's allies had gone door to door, spreading rumors that I was a con artist myself, that I'd been evicted from my last home, even that I was trying to get rid of the HOA so I could flip my house for a profit. None of it was true, but lies travel faster than truth. That night, our team gathered again in the diner. Everyone looked tense, shadows under their eyes. They're slandering you hard, Maria said, sliding her phone across the table to show me screenshots. Half the neighborhood thinks you're the scammer, which is exactly what Gerald wants, Tom said grimly. Confuse them. If they don't know who to believe, they'll stick with the devil they know. I slammed my fist lightly on the table. Then we need to fight back with facts. No more waiting. We release everything publicly. Tom shook his head. Not yet. Dumping all of it online gives Gerald room to twist it. He'll claim it's doctored. No, we hold the meeting as planned. In person. Face to face. Evidence laid out step by step. Jake leaned in. In the meantime, I can leak smaller pieces. Screenshots of the personal account, the inconsistent receipts, nothing explosive, just enough to stir doubt until the meeting. We all agreed. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. When I got home that night, the house felt unnervingly quiet. Emily had put the kids to bed early. On the front porch, taped to the railing, was another envelope. Inside, block letters screamed at me, "We warned you. Last chance to stop. My stomach turned. The threats were becoming more brazen. I checked the street but saw only darkness and the faint glow of porch lights. Whoever left it was long gone. I slipped the letter into our evidence folder. If Gerald thought intimidation would silence me, he was dead wrong. Later. As I organized files on my computer, a new email notification appeared. The sender was anonymous, no subject line, just a single sentence. You missed one account. Attached was a screenshot of a balance statement from a local credit union. The account holder's name made my blood run cold, Marla Whitman. Balance over $180,000. The kicker. The statement showed a second signatory on the account, someone with the last name Reynolds. I leaned closer, my heart pounding. Reynolds wasn't anyone in Maplewood. But when I searched the name, one hit jumped out: a woman in Riverton, the very town the Whitmans had lived in before. I whispered into the stillness of my office. They didn't just scam Maplewood. They've been doing this for years. And now, someone else out there, someone connected to Riverton, was feeding me clues. The next evening, our group huddled once again in the diner. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead did little to settle the tension crackling between us. I laid my laptop on the table and pulled up the email I'd received the night before. This just came in, I said, spinning the screen toward them. The screenshot glowed on the screen, a bank statement from the Maplewood Credit Union. Balance $182 or $640. Account holder Marla Whitman. But what grabbed everyone's attention was the line beneath: joint signatory Elaine Reynolds. Maria gasped. That name, Reynolds. I know it. Wasn't that the maiden name of Marla's sister? Jake nodded, already typing furiously. Cross-referencing. Yep. Elaine Reynolds. Lives in Riverton. Guess what? She moved there 28 years ago. Public record shows she sold her house the same year the Whitmans left town. Lisa's jaw dropped. So they were in on it together. First Riverton, then Maplewood. I rubbed my temples. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't just a local scam. It was a family business, 2 sisters, 2 towns, decades of deception. Tom leaned back in his chair, arms folded. This ties it together. Not only is Maplewood HOA fake, but there's precedent. Riverton residents filed complaints all those years ago. The Whitmans bailed before they got caught. Now the sister's name is on the account here. That's a smoking gun. But who sent this to me? I asked quietly. The email was anonymous. Everyone exchanged uneasy looks. Could be Evan, Maria suggested. Maybe he couldn't bring himself to testify openly, so he's leaking info quietly. Or someone from Riverton who's been waiting for this day. Tom said, either way, we have more than enough to blow this open. I exhaled slowly. Then we do it. We call the emergency meeting. No more whispers. No more threats in mailboxes. We show the whole neighborhood what's been happening under their noses. Henry frowned. We need to be careful. Gerald isn't going to stand there quietly while you destroy him. He'll shout. He'll threaten. Maybe worse. Then we make it impossible for him to wriggle out, I said firmly. Step by step. Evidence laid bare. Receipts. Bank statements. The county letter. Riverton complaints. And now this joint account. We'll put it on a projector if we have to. Tom leaned forward. I'll reach out to a friend in the police department. Not a full arrest yet, but a liaison, just in case things get out of hand. For a moment, silence settled over the group. We were all thinking the same thing: this could end peacefully, or it could explode. When the meeting broke up, Lisa caught my arm. Her voice was low, urgent. Daniel, they won't go down easy. People like Gerald and Marla, they cling to power with their nails and teeth. Promise me you'll be careful. I will, I said, though the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. That night, back at home, I sat in my office staring at the growing pile of evidence. The receipts, the forged letter, the county stamp. and now the screenshot of the joint account. It was enough to bury them, but fear gnawed at me. Gerald knew I was coming for him. He'd already tried threats and legal bluster. What would he do when the whole neighborhood turned against him? Emily appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "You're not sleeping again." I forced a smile. "Almost done. Just trying to make sense of all this." She studied me, then whispered, "Promise me you'll walk away if it gets dangerous." I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew there was no walking away anymore. 2 days later, flyers appeared in every mailbox on our block. Emergency neighborhood meeting. Friday night, community hall, topic financial transparency and the Maplewood HOA. Beneath it, my name and Tom's, listed as organizers. It was official. The battle lines had been drawn. And as I tucked the final flyer into my neighbor's mailbox, I whispered to myself, Friday night, the truth comes out. Friday night arrived like a storm cloud. By the time I walked into the community hall, the air was already charged. Neighbors packed the rows of folding chairs, murmuring in tight clusters. Some glared at me as I entered, others gave tentative nods of support. Every eye carried suspicion, curiosity, or dread. Gerald and Marla sat at the front, arms folded, their faces masks of indignation. Gerald's leather briefcase rested at his feet like a weapon waiting to be drawn. Tom stood beside me at the podium. He leaned close, whispering, "Stay calm. Stick to the order. Facts first, emotions second." I nodded, though my pulse thundered in my ears. I cleared my throat and faced the crowd. "My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 42 years old, a software engineer, and I moved here 3 weeks ago with my family. Tonight isn't about me. It's about Maplewood, about the money we've all paid for 25 years, and about the truth we all deserve to know." The room buzzed with tension. Gerald shot up before I could continue. "This man is a liar. He's been here less than a month and he thinks he can tear down what Marla and I built." Marla added sharply, "Don't listen to him. He's trying to destroy Maplewood for his own gain." I raised my voice above the noise. "If Maplewood has a legitimate HOA, then Gerald and Marla have nothing to fear from the truth. But if it doesn't, then every single one of us has been paying into a lie." I gestured to the projector Jake had set up. The first slide flashed onto the screen a collection of receipts handwritten, typed, some photocopied, all inconsistent. These are dues collected over 15 years. No official letterhead, no city verification, just scraps of paper. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Next," Henry stepped forward, pointing to a chart. "Here are records from the city. In years, Gerald claimed the HOA paid for tree trimming. The county budget covered it. The so-called neighborhood watch was nothing more than volunteers. The services you thought you paid for were already free." Marla slammed her palm on the table. "Lies, twisted lies." Tom calmly handed her a copy of the county's official statement. "This isn't from Daniel. It's from Franklin County itself. No registered HOA exists for Maplewood." Gasps erupted. Some neighbors clutched their receipts tighter. Others whispered furiously. Gerald grabbed his briefcase, yanking out the same forged letter he had shown weeks before. "Here proof from the city," he barked. But Maria, holding a magnified copy of the seal, countered, "That's a forgery. The city stopped using this emblem 15 years ago. And the font, not even close to standard." The crowd's murmurs turned into angry shouts. "We've been duped. Is this true?" All these years I raised my hand. And there's more. Jake pulled up the screenshot of the bank account $182,640 with Marla and Elaine Reynolds listed as signatories. This isn't speculation. This is money taken directly from us, sitting in a personal account. And it's tied to Marla's sister, the same sister who lived in Riverton, where the Whitmans ran the same scam before fleeing here. Chaos. Voices shouting over one another. Some neighbors surged to their feet, demanding answers. Others defended Gerald blindly, insisting he must have had a reason. Gerald's face turned crimson. Enough of this circus. You have no proof of intent, no proof I ever stole a dime. You're a mob stirred up by a stranger. I leaned into the microphone. If everything we've shown tonight isn't enough, then perhaps you'd prefer to hear it from someone closer to home. The hall fell into a hush. From the back of the room, footsteps echoed. Heads turned as Evan Whitman walked slowly down the aisle, his face pale but resolute. He stopped at the front, glancing at his father, then at the crowd. His voice trembled, but carried. "My name is Evan Whitman. I'm Gerald's son, and everything they've told you tonight is true." Gasps exploded across the hall. Gerald's face drained of color. The room was no longer divided, it was electrified. The room erupted like a thunderclap. "Evan," someone gasped. His own son. Gerald's face contorted, veins rising in his neck. "Sit down. Evan. Now." But Evan shook his head, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the podium. "No. Dad. I've been silent for too long." He turned to the crowd. "You've trusted my parents for 25 years, but that trust has been betrayed. Every dollar you paid in dues, every so-called HOA fee went straight into their pockets." Marla leapt to her feet. "That's enough. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Evan snapped, his voice cracking but firm. He pulled his phone from his pocket, swiping quickly before holding it up. "Here. Screenshots of my mother's account, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all from your checks. I've seen the deposits with my own eyes. They never paid for services. They only used your money to pay off their mortgage, their cars, even our vacations." Gasps rippled through the hall. People craned their necks to see the glowing screen. Gerald lunged toward his son, his voice booming. "You're a liar. You're ungrateful. You think you can betray your own family in front of these people." Tom stepped between them, his presence steady as stone. "Back off, Gerald. Threatening your son in front of the entire neighborhood won't save you." Evan's hands shook, but his voice grew stronger. "I didn't want this. I didn't want to turn against my own parents. But when Dad asked me to take over the HOA, I realized it would never stop. It would just be me carrying on the lie. I couldn't do it. The crowd was no longer whispering, they were shouting, furious, betrayed. You stole from us 25 years. All that money gone." Gerald slammed both fists on the table, his voice ragged. "You think you can judge me? Do you know what it takes to hold a neighborhood together, who kept out the riffraff, who organized the events you all loved? You enjoyed the benefits, and now you call it theft." Maria shot back from the crowd, her voice cutting through the din. "Benefits. You mean the summer picnic we paid for ourselves, the lights the city installed. You pocketed our money and gave us nothing but scraps." Marla's mask of indignation cracked, desperation bleeding through. "We didn't hurt anyone. It was just contributions, voluntary contributions." "Voluntary," Henry barked. "You threatened fines. You told me I couldn't repaint my house unless I paid my dues. You scared us into thinking you had authority." Neighbors shouted agreement, voices rising into a storm. Gerald's eyes darted from face to face, realizing the tide had shifted. His authority was crumbling, right there in the very hall where he had reigned for decades. I stepped forward, raising the official county letter high. "The city confirms it. Maplewood has never had a registered HOA. Gerald and Marla have no legal authority. Every penny they collected was fraud." The roar of outrage swelled, shaking the walls. Gerald tried one last card. He pulled a sheaf of papers from his briefcase, waving them wildly. "I'll sue every one of you for defamation. You'll regret ever turning against me." But the words sounded hollow now, drowned out by the fury of dozens of betrayed neighbors. And then, just when the chaos threatened to spiral out of control, the double doors at the back of the hall swung open. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, their presence instantly silencing the room. All eyes turned as one of them spoke firmly, his voice carrying over the stunned silence Gerald and Marla Whitman. "We need to have a word." The hall froze, the tension snapping like a live wire. The entire hall fell silent as the two police officers advanced down the aisle, their radios crackling faintly. Every creak of their boots on the wooden floor sounded like a gavel striking. Gerald tried to compose himself, straightening his blazer, but his face was still blotched crimson. "Officers," he said with forced calm, "we're in the middle of a private meeting. This is a misunderstanding." The taller officer, a man with a square jaw, lifted a hand. "Sir, we've received multiple reports regarding financial misconduct tied to the so-called Maplewood HOA. We're here to ask you and your wife a few questions." Marla clutched her handbag like a lifeline. "This is outrageous. We've done nothing wrong. These people are ungrateful. Look at what we've built here." The officer's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, we're not here to argue. We just need you both to come with us for questioning." A murmur surged through the crowd, half disbelief, half vindication. Gerald puffed out his chest, his voice rising. "You can't just waltz in here and humiliate us in front of our neighbors. We've kept this community together for 25 years from the second row," Henry shouted back. "You stole from us for 25 years. More voices piled on. You threatened us with fake fines. My family struggled while you lived off our money. You're thieves, not leaders." The fury of the residents filled the room, decades of misplaced trust turning to white-hot rage. Gerald raised his hands, shouting over the din. It wasn't theft. It was management, without us. This place would have fallen apart, but his words were drowned out by the chorus of betrayal. Evan stood rigid beside me, his face pale but resolute. "Stop, Dad," he said softly, though the microphone carried his words across the room. "It's over." Gerald turned on him with eyes wild. You did this. You stabbed us in the back." Evan flinched but didn't look away. "I told the truth. Something you never could." The shorter officer stepped forward now, his voice firm. "Sir, ma'am, please. Let's do this the easy way." Marla suddenly lunged for the briefcase on the table, snapping it shut. "You have no right to take our things," she screamed. The officer gently but firmly removed the case from her hands. "This will be taken into evidence." The community hall was vibrating with whispers, gasps, the scrape of chairs as neighbors leaned forward. It was the moment they had never imagined they would see their leaders, the couple who had presided over Maplewood for a generation, standing exposed under the fluorescent lights like common criminals. Finally. Gerald's shoulders sagged. His defiance seemed to deflate as the officers guided him and Marla toward the doors. The murmurs rose to a roar. Some people shouted shame, while others demanded restitution. Just before the officers led them out, Gerald twisted back toward the crowd, his voice hoarse but venomous. "You think you've won. You'll see what happens when this place collapses without us. You'll beg to have us back." The doors slammed shut behind him, leaving an echo that hung heavy in the hall. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Maria rose from her seat, her voice trembling with anger. "They lied to us. For 25 years. They stole from us. Now what happens? Who takes charge?" Dozens of voices clamored at once. "We need real accountability. We should sue them for every cent. No. We need to form a real HOA. With rules this time, I looked at the sea of outraged faces, a community both fractured and galvanized. The Whitmans were gone for now, but the damage they'd left behind would take more than one night to repair. Tom leaned toward me, his voice low. "This is the beginning, Daniel, not the end." "They'll face charges, sure, but now Maplewood has to decide who it really is without them." I exhaled, feeling both relief and dread. The hardest part? The confrontation was over. But what came next might be even more difficult, rebuilding trust from the ashes of betrayal. As the crowd's arguments grew louder, I whispered to myself, "This isn't finished. not by a long shot. The following morning, Maplewood felt like a different place. Cars slowed as neighbors stopped in the street, voices raised in heated arguments, porch lights flicked on earlier than usual, front doors slammed shut, blinds twitched as people peeked out at one another. For a community that once prided itself on neighborly smiles and block parties, the atmosphere was thick with suspicion and shame. I walked to the end of my driveway and found Mrs. Porter standing stiffly by her mailbox. Her eyes were red. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I can't believe I defended them last week. I told you Gerald paid for my fence. I told everyone he was kind. And all this time," her voice cracked, "it was my own money. I feel like a fool." I tried to soften my tone. "Don't blame yourself. They built an entire world of lies to make themselves look indispensable. Anyone could have fallen for it. Most of us did." Across the street, two men were shouting at each other. One yelled, "You knew about this and said nothing." The other shot back, "I trusted them, just like you did." Emily joined me on the porch, her arms folded. "It's chaos out here," she muttered. "Nobody knows who to be angry at, the Whitmans or themselves." By noon, the chaos had spread beyond Maplewood. News vans rolled in, their antennas stretching skyward. A reporter stood on the corner, microphone in hand. "Breaking news out of Franklin County tonight. Residents of Maplewood discovered that their Homeowners Association, believed to have operated for 25 years, may have been nothing more than a fraud. Police confirmed that Gerald and Marla Whitman were brought in for questioning late last night." I watched from the living room as the camera panned across our quiet streets. Neighbors caught mid-argument. Some covered their faces, others shouted into microphones. Emily turned to me, her expression unreadable. "They're going to put our entire neighborhood on the evening news. Everyone in Ohio is going to know." Sure enough, phones began buzzing all afternoon. Friends from Columbus texted me, "Daniel, is this your neighborhood on TV?" My coworkers messaged, "Man, you moved 3 weeks ago and already uncover a scandal." I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt the weight of an entire community pressing down on my shoulders. That evening, the diner was packed not with our little task force this time, but with dozens of neighbors, crammed into booths and leaning against walls. The smell of fried onions and coffee hung heavy as voices clashed. "We should demand restitution." One man bellowed, "Every cent they took should be returned from where." Another snapped, "They spent it. You think the bank accounts are still full? They have assets." Lisa cut in, "A house, cars, retirement funds. They'll be seized if the charges stick." A woman near the counter shook her head. "I don't even care about the money. I care that they made us look like idiots. 25 years, and not one of us asked to see paperwork. What does that say about us?" The room quieted at that. Her words stung because they were true. Shame settled like a heavy blanket. Tom, ever the steady voice, stood near the back. "We can beat ourselves up later. Right now, we need to focus on two things: pushing the case forward and deciding what comes next. Maplewood can't stay in limbo forever." "Next," someone echoed bitterly. "What's next?" "Another scammer pretending to lead us." "No," Tom said firmly. "Next time, it's real, transparent, democratic. If we choose to form a legitimate HOA or even just a neighborhood association, it will be registered, audited, and accountable." The conversation spun on, a mixture of anger, sorrow, and reluctant determination. When I stepped outside for some air, a reporter's van rolled by, its camera pointed squarely at me. The reporter called out, "Mr. Harper, is it true you were the one who exposed the fraud?" I froze. In that moment, I realized this story wasn't just Maplewood's anymore. It was bigger statewide, maybe national. And like it or not, my name was tied to it. Neighbors gathered around, some clapping me on the back, others glaring as though I had dragged them into humiliation. And as the cameras flashed, one thought kept circling in my head: uncovering the scam was only half the battle. The harder fight, the one for unity, for trust, for dignity, was just beginning. The courthouse in downtown Franklin County buzzed with reporters and flashing cameras when the Whitmans finally appeared for arraignment. Marla clutched her purse as though it could shield her from the jeers of the crowd, while Gerald kept his chin defiantly high, jaw clenched as if daring anyone to meet his gaze. I stood at the back of the crowd with Tom, Lisa, and a handful of neighbors. None of us had wanted to miss it. For 25 years they had lorded over us. Now, at last, they had to answer to the law. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with anticipation. The prosecutor's voice was steady as he read the charges: fraud, misappropriation of funds, falsifying documents, intimidation. Each word was like a hammer, driving home the reality of what we had lived under. Over the span of 25 years, he continued, the defendants collected approximately $112,000 in so-called dues from Maplewood residents. These funds were deposited into personal accounts and used for private expenses, including mortgage payments, vehicle purchases, vacations, and other non-community purposes. Gasps swept through the benches. Even though many of us had suspected the amount was high, hearing the figure aloud was staggering. $112,000, money from birthday parties skipped, bills stretched thin, neighbors who'd gone without in order to keep up with the so-called HOA. Marla dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though no tears fell. Gerald glared straight ahead, refusing to look at the crowd. When the defense attorney rose, his tone was smooth, almost rehearsed. Ladies and gentlemen, my clients never forced anyone to pay. The fees were voluntary contributions, a neighborhood tradition. Any missteps in paperwork were clerical oversights, not malicious intent. Whispers hissed through the benches. I wanted to shout, lies. But Tom placed a hand on my shoulder, reminding me to keep calm. The prosecutor was ready. He held up copies of the threatening letters, drop it or else. Last chance to stop, and the forged city document Marla had brandished. Does this look voluntary? Does this look like an innocent mistake? The judge's gavel struck once for silence. Gerald's jaw twitched, his bravado cracking for the first time. As the proceedings wrapped for the day, the judge set bail high, citing long-term deceptive practices and risk of further intimidation. The Whitmans were escorted out in handcuffs. The sight sent a ripple of catharsis through the courtroom. For the first time, it felt like Maplewood might truly be free. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones jutted like weapons. Mr. Harper, do you feel vindicated? What does this mean for your community? I hesitated, the crowd of cameras blinding me. It means, I said carefully, that lies can't last forever. It means neighbors deserve honesty. And it means justice has finally started. That night, back in Maplewood, the mood was different. Children played in driveways again. People lingered on sidewalks, no longer avoiding eye contact. But beneath the relief was another emotion: shame. In Maria's kitchen, where a few of us gathered, Mrs. Porter admitted what many were thinking. I still can't believe I let them trick me for so long. I defended them. I scolded you, Daniel. When you asked for bylaws, how could I have been so blind? I shook my head. They fooled everyone, not just you. They built their power on trust. And when trust is abused long enough, it feels impossible to question. Tom added, the real test now is whether Maplewood can rebuild, not just financially, but as a community. As we sat in silence, the news played in the background. The anchor's words echoed. The Whitmans face up to 15 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Hearing it didn't erase the damage, but it gave us something we hadn't had in weeks: hope. And yet, I couldn't shake the question forming in my mind. When the Whitmans are gone, who will Maplewood become in the weeks after the arraignment? Maplewood slowly began to stitch itself back together. The Whitmans' house sat dark and silent, its manicured lawn now overgrown, a hollow monument to years of deception. For a while, no one wanted to even walk past it. But as days turned into weeks, the conversations in the neighborhood shifted from anger to determination. It started in small gatherings, neighbors on porches, parents by the school bus stop asking the same question: what comes next? At first, the answers were bitter. "I don't want another HOA ever again," one man growled. "We've had enough rulers for a lifetime." But others disagreed. Lisa, the bookkeeper, pointed out, "If we don't organize, we'll fall apart. Maintenance will slip. Disputes will escalate. We need structure, but real legal structure this time." So a meeting was called, not by Gerald, not by fear, but by the residents themselves. The community hall filled once more. But this time the air felt different. No intimidation, no shouting over a gavel, just cautious hope. Tom stood at the front, flanked by Lisa and Maria. "Tonight," he began, "we decide whether Maplewood will remain divided or whether we'll build something new. A legitimate, registered association with bylaws, elections, term limits, and audits. No one person holding power forever. Total transparency." The crowd buzzed with discussion, but for the first time, it wasn't angry. It was thoughtful. Collaborative. Hands shot up. Ideas flowed. Rotating leadership every 2 years. Quarterly financial reports posted publicly. A committee, not a single president, so no one can abuse authority. By the end of the night, votes were cast. Unanimously, Maplewood chose to form a real Homeowners Association registered with the state, accountable to its members, protected from the shadows where fraud had once thrived. As neighbors filed out, I lingered by the doorway, listening to their voices. For the first time since moving here, I felt pride instead of dread. This wasn't the Maplewood the Whitmans built. This was the Maplewood we were reclaiming. A month later, I received a call from the prosecutor's office. The Whitmans had accepted a plea deal, restitution payments, and a lengthy prison sentence. Their assets, house, vehicles, savings would be liquidated, with proceeds divided among the residents. No amount of money could erase the years of betrayal, but it was a start. That evening, Emily and I sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the trees. Kids played tag in the cul-de-sac, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Mrs. Porter walked by and waved, a genuine smile on her face for the first time since the scandal broke. Emily nudged me gently. "You realize you've changed this neighborhood forever, don't you?" I shook my head. I didn't do it alone. Everyone had to face the truth together. That's what really changed things. Still, as I looked around at Maplewood, at the neighbors who were no longer whispering in fear but talking openly about the future, I felt a quiet sense of peace. For weeks, this place had been a battlefield. Now it was healing. I stood, looking down the street, and thought about the lesson carved into Maplewood's history. Trust is precious. When abused, it corrodes everything. But when reclaimed, it can bind a community tighter than ever. Turning back to Emily, I said softly, "For 25 years, the Whitmans stole more than money. They stole our peace. But tonight, looking around, I think we finally stole it back." And as I reflect now, telling this story, I leave you with a question. If your neighborhood had been fooled for decades, would you forgive the bystanders who stayed silent, or hold them accountable too?